Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme we'll be discussing David Cameron, our new Foreign Secretary and former Prime Minister, is calling for a two-state solution of the Middle East conflict, and we'll be unpacking some of his policy ideas and asking what implications does this have for Britain but also Israel's security. And in this programme today I'm joined by Melanie Symonds, who is the editor and publisher of Heart newspaper, together with Helen, Spiby, Vann from the Christian People's Alliance. Ladies, warm welcome to Politics Today. Great to see you both. And I know that you've been working very hard over the last few weeks, Melanie, to produce a new edition of Heart newspaper that really does focus on Israel's war against the Islamist terrorist organisation Hamas in Gaza. Share with us what our viewers can expect.
Thank you. Well, that's the cover. The Lord gave the headline, "Where is the Prince of Peace?" a few weeks ago, and what we've been seeing is that where people have been praying, they've been getting results. So the little girl on the cover was amongst the first lot released, and her father, Yoni Asher, had spoken in the European Parliament, and then he stood up at the end and said the Shema. And there have been lots of other wonderful examples of Israelis coming back to the Lord, praying and getting results. Of course, we know Christians around the world are praying. That's a page about the recent pro-Palestine demos and some quite strong opinions on that, including a warning from the editor of Israel Today saying, "You'll be next," and I'm not, and also a piece by me about my former teaching union would have paid my lunch and travel if I'd gone to protest in the pro-Palestine march. Werner Oder, that's what the Lord showed him about Gaza, something very specific. It's positive. I think we have to remember to pray positively. There could be a wonderful future for Gaza.
Absolutely, and of course Werner Oder's got an amazing testimony.
The first page of a 4-page centre supplement in the paper, which people could pull out and give to people who aren't churchgoers or who don't really understand a lot about Israel yet. There's a lot of information about the 7th of October attacks on the base of Never Again, and also some information about where Gaza actually gets its fuel, electricity, water supplies from, which not a lot of people know. And wonderful testimony of the man that you interviewed, Simon, how he met the Iranian, the militiaman, how he met Jesus in his prison cell.
Amazing, yeah. Nice to see that mentioned in there.
That's part of the centre supplement, lots of information about Gaza.
Okay, brilliant. And of course, I have to mention that Gordon Petty's book review is also in there, where he does a book review of the book called The Son of Hamas, Hassan Youssef. So if you haven't got a copy of Melanie's Heart newspaper, she'll be willing to get out. Just get in contact with her from the details below from the Heart website. Helen, it's great to see you on the programme. But share with us, for example, give us an update on what you've been doing, you guys at the Christian People's Alliance.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon.
Pleasure.
We've just issued a draft manifesto, general election manifesto, which will be relevant for next year when we have the general election. Plus, we're also putting candidates in place. And I would really like to encourage any viewers who are interested in standing for us, please contact us. And if you feel that God is stirring you about the state of the nation and the injustice and the abandonment that we see around us of God's ways, please come on board with us, because if you think about who's representing us in Parliament at the moment, a majority of secularists, and they don't really know what's good in God's eyes. And so we do need more Christians, and the same thing applies next year also with the London Assembly elections. Last year, Christian People's Alliance got about 29,000 votes, and we need to get 100,000. That's what we're aiming for. Then we'll get one seat. Imagine if we even have one Christian on the London Assembly, it would just be wonderful.
And that is Maureen, isn't she? She's top of the list.
Yes.
Very good. So we all want Maureen to win the seat at the London Assembly. Melanie, what do you make of David Cameron, our new Foreign Minister? Has been making headlines during his recent visit to Israel and the Palestinian Authority. He's hosted a delegation of foreign ministers from the Arab and Islamic countries in London last week. But before we discuss David Cameron, what are your thoughts on him returning to frontline politics?
I was feeling not too negative about it because I actually used to quite like him. I thought he was a good representative for Britain and still in theory would be, like Lord Alec Douglas Hume, you know, brought that sort of public school polish, etc., and was a wielder of soft power. But my concern now is about Cameron and what his actual record. As we know, 10 years ago in 2013, he introduced same-sex marriage, and he went against God's created order and pushed that through. And that was as a conservative, not as a radical leftist leader. And now, so you've got this man who has humanist values. He's probably a very nice man. He wants everyone to be happy and live happily ever after. And he's probably one now wants the same for Israel. But I had a horrible revelation this morning just before I came up here. And I suddenly realised how the Lord is, one of the reasons the Lord is angry. I believe he said to me, my anger is aroused, and other people have confirmed that. Over how the nation's been treating Israel. But you've got this man who's gone against God's created order once, and now he is sort of in charge on behalf of Britain, apart from Rishi Sunak, with dealing with the apple of God's eye. And this is really serious.
Yeah, I think you're also going to mention the fact he's also a big Remainer and, of course, kind of failed when it came to the Brexit referendum, lost that, had to resign as Prime Minister back in 2016, and now he's back. Helen, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. I mean, we see that Rishi himself has no political legitimacy because not one single member of the Conservative Party voted for him when he became leader in October of last year. Not one single member of Parliament has even voted for him, so he has zero political legitimacy. And now he's parachuted his friend David Cameron into the office of Foreign Minister, and yet David Cameron was not a member of Parliament, he was not even a member of the House of Lords, and was given a period straight away to take this position. So share with us on your thoughts on David Cameron becoming our new Foreign Minister.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to start with, when Boris got the vote of no confidence, then Liz Truss was voted in. When she stepped down, Rishi Sunak...
She was forced to step down.
She was forced to step down. Rishi Sunak took her place, basically. So he hasn't actually ever gone through an election, and he didn't have, as you say, he didn't have the support of the Tories at the time. So really, it's a sort of a matter of happenstance that he happens to be there in the first place. He's also broken some pledges that he made, as was highlighted by Suella Braverman. And what we do know is that he's committed to the World Economic Forum and the One World Order. And he's also, he supports quite a lot of progressive ideology in general. And in terms of David Cameron, well, I think pretty much the whole nation groaned when he got voted back. I mean, I didn't actually have the same positive thoughts as Melanie did about him. And in my mind, he's not really known for his strong convictions or even his sincerity, wanting the best for the people of Britain. In terms of the EU, he wants us to get closer back to the EU, and he made some predictions which didn't actually happen. You know, London is still a financial capital, still a force to be reckoned with. He said it would be a disaster if we left, which it wasn't. Our exports in general are up, and we still do some trade with the EU. So some of the things that he said were going to happen didn't. And so really, I'm not sure whether he's a good candidate at all for this role. And, you know, the people of the country made it clear that they wanted to leave the EU, and he still really hasn't taken that on board.
No, absolutely. Time will tell what he will do as Foreign Secretary. But Melanie, for example, we see that with David Cameron has recently made a visit to Israel. We saw how he saw how the Jewish communities or the Israeli communities in the south of Israel were devastated by the appalling and evil mass terrorist attack by Hamas on Saturday, the 7th of October. But I fear now that Israel will have to pay a high price for British and American support for their military operation in Gaza to destroy Hamas. Share with us your thoughts.
Yes, because the governments are walking a tightrope between trying to help Israel, I think their gut instinct might be to do the right thing and help Israel and support her. But on the other hand, they have to appease their own Muslim populations and their and also, of course, there are Muslim populations in most of the Western European countries now, but also to be aware of what viewers are being bombarded with on their television screens night after night. And I hold the BBC and others responsible for the shift in public opinion, because in World War II, for example, we didn't see Germans being killed every night, because the television, because of its power, is now making people think that if people are being killed, that is bad, and therefore the people who are doing the killing are in the wrong. And they do this constant comparison. And as we know, the BBC quotes Hamas's Ministry of Health numbers, which are completely wrong and illogical, but they don't query it, whereas everything the IDF does, they query and challenge. And it's really serious, because in World War II, the newspapers generally took the government line, and for instance, Lord Beaverbrook was close to the government and would have reported what they wanted. And I'd like to quote something which Philip Vann, who produced a very good bulletin called Trumpet Sounds, has put in his latest update, and he quoted General Patton, what General Patton told the US Third Army in World War II. He said, "The harder we push, the more Germans we kill. The more Germans we kill, the fewer of our men will be killed. Pushing harder means fewer casualties." This is what the IDF has tried to do, but it hasn't been understood in that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to add that. Firstly, in the Second World War, Britain faced an existential threat from the rise of Nazism, particularly Hitler, and virtually controlled virtually all of Europe. We were left alone to fight the Nazis and the Axis powers. But also the same fact that Israel also faces an existential threat. And I think my big concern here is that we see the Biden administration supporting Israel publicly, but then doing another thing behind the scenes. We see the British government allowing Israel to carry out its military operations to destroy Hamas as a terrorist organisation and its infrastructure, but the danger is that Hamas use women and children as human shields, and also the hostages. So Israel's facing asymmetrical warfare. That's why visually it looks awful, but Israel has no choice, because they've got to protect her citizens, because it's the right of any government. It's the first responsibility of any government to protect her citizens. But I would be very, very concerned now that in support of the IDF, in support of Israel's military operations against Hamas in Gaza, the British and the Americans are going to turn to Israel and say, right, we've helped you here, now we want you to create a Palestinian state which will endanger Israel's security anymore. Helen, what do you also make of the fact that David Cameron this week hosted a delegation of foreign ministers from the Arab world and Islamic countries in London at Lancaster House to discuss cooperation over the war with Israel and Hamas?
Yes, well, the first thing that struck me was there was no Israeli representation there. So the Arab Islamic Ministerial Committee has actually been going around the 5 permanent member states of the United Nations Security Council. And that's Britain, America, France, Russia and China, with a view to persuading us all to stop the war between Israel and Hamas. Now, they have the view, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, that Israel is not acting in self-defence relating to the massacre on the 7th of October. So these are the people that David Cameron met in Lancaster House. And while I think it's good to talk with eyes open to the reality of the situation. And at the meeting, David Cameron was talking about humanitarian aid being allowed and fuel, all these kinds of things which we've all been talking about, which everybody's talked about before, and which is already happening. And he's simply waffling, really. He's got nothing new to bring to the table. And really, we need people who are going to contribute ideas and understand it from both sides. It would have been much better if he'd explained to the group that Israel has actually been chaperoning the civilians to safe places, that they've been protecting them from getting attacked by Hamas, and all the other things actually that the IDF do to limit casualties, including the knocker bombs and the leaflets explaining to the civilians to evacuate the areas, providing them with all kinds of things which has never been seen in any other war that I've ever heard of, that civilians would be so well taken care of by the other side. So really, I think David Cameron is likely to be doing more harm than good. And I have actually a bit of a chilling quote here from, it's a young man called Sohail Ahmed, a Muslim born in the UK. His family are here. And when he turned away from radicalism, he was abandoned by his family. And this is actually what, he speaks out about the right of Israel to self-determine, but he also is very frank about the threat. And this is what he says. When Muslims ask, is it permissible for us to diplomatically negotiate a peace agreement with the Israeli state? Muslim scholars unanimously agree, yes, it's permissible, only if your end goal is to become strong enough economically, politically, militarily, so eventually you can invade and take over Israel. You have to lie to the Jews, to lie to the Israelis. And I think David Cameron's naivety is a danger to the nation.
Well said, and that particular term is called a hudna, which is a temporary cessation of violence until you become into a stronger position, then you can launch out attack. And Hamas have 20 years ago offered Israel a hudna for 10 years, but knowing that they'll rearm, get stronger and carry out the same sort of massacres they did on October the 7th. And Melanie, I just had a look at the press release produced by the Foreign Office regarding David Cameron. He wanted to discuss how the Israeli hostages could be released and to increase aid into Gaza to reach a long-term solution to the crisis. Does David Cameron not know that Israel is on the front line in the battle of evil that is manifesting itself in the Islamic ideology of Hamas? That this is the same war that Britain, the United States, the Western world faces, and literally Israel is on the front line in actually propelling this evil ideology that would take over the world and destroy the world, the same way that Nazism did in the 1930s and 40s.
Yes, one would like to think that David Cameron could see this. This has been exactly on my heart since the beginning, that our politicians, I think some can see it, are holding, that Israel is holding the line for Western so-called civilization. And we've seen just on our streets recently this flare-up of really quite intimidating behaviour. And we had the chant on the tube train, which was appalling, which everyone joined in on, and making the Jewish community feel very unsafe. Happily, I was on the March Against Anti-Semitism on last Sunday, and 3 government ministers and 1 Labour shadow minister spoke, and they all spoke very well. And that was Robert Jenrick, the Home Office Minister, Tom Tugendhat, the Minister for Security, and Robert Halfon, the Universities Minister. And they all said, they said that we have to stand against anti-Semitism. It's completely unacceptable, and what's going on in the Middle East shouldn't affect our British way of life, because I think it's been a bit of a wake-up call that there's a lot of hatred and just ready to flare up at a moment's notice, and how quickly people transfer their distaste they might have for Israel's actions, which we don't share, but distaste for their actions into attacking a whole race. It's appalling. I mean, it's prophesied, we know that. I've been asking myself, is this the time of the hunters coming? People are praying for more Jews to return home where they will feel safe. But my other concern is that David Cameron's focus should be on making Gaza more self-sufficient, not militarily, obviously, it's got to be disarmed, and able to export its own goods and provide for its people. Because when Israel left in 2005, Gaza had I think it was the largest dairy herd outside Europe.
Oh no, well, it had big greenhouses.
Yes, well, the dairy herd too.
As well as like
yes.
worth over 17 million pounds, and it was just destroyed overnight. Helen, I have to ask you, because we're running out of time for the programme, they've got about 7 minutes left. What do you make of David Cameron saying that he wants to increase British taxpayers' money to be given to the Palestinians by an extra 30 million, and that's on top of the 27 million already given this year? So effectively, we, the taxpayer, are giving the Palestinian Authority now £57 million, when we know, for example, the huge amounts of corruption within the Palestinian Authority is going into the leaders' back pockets, and Hamas leaders have made billions out of this conflict, living in Doha and Qatar, where literally many of them have anything between £3 and £5 billion each that they've amassed from this conflict. Share with us how this is actually perpetuating the conflict rather than actually solving it.
Yes, I mean, you know, I am proud to be British when we do give aid overseas to countries that need it to relieve suffering and to help people get a better life. But when it's going to a corrupt organisation, then it's obviously worrying, and it's really unfair to the British people that our hard-earned money is actually going to potentially fund terrorism. And of course, that isn't going to help the peace process whatsoever if you're actually funding organisations that aren't actually seeking peace and are completely at odds with what your own aims and goals are. And yes, I mean, it's shocking really that I think it was the New York Post that reported that just the top 3 leaders alone of Hamas are getting a total of $11 billion. Well, they're worth $11 billion, living a life of luxury in Qatar, while the Palestinian people are suffering on the front lines of the conflict. And the thing is, it's not a small amount anyway that Gaza receives in international aid, not even just from the United Nations, which I think is 600 million. Just in 2020 alone, they receive huge amounts of aid already going into that small country, also from the Arab world. So whatever we give is really almost a drop in the ocean, and it sounds to me more like David Cameron is trying to sort of curry some kind of favour with the Muslim community here, rather than actually a genuine and sincere vision to try and make the situation better.
Yeah. Melanie, why do you think that we're seeing from David Cameron pushing the same old globalist policies in the Middle East that have failed over the last decades, again now calling for a two-state solution, an Israeli state and a Palestinian state, and time again it proves that when Israel concedes territory, all Israel gets is violence and terrorism. And President Trump provided an alternative peace plan through the Abraham Accords, which completely bypassed the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, froze US aid to the Palestinian Authority, which actually then was beginning to bring them to the negotiation table. So they see their Arab neighbours, such as the Saudis, reaching out to the Israelis, Bahrain and also the United Arab Emirates also making peace with Israel, including Sudan. So surely the idea of this two-state solution thing has proved over the decades it doesn't work and it's a complete failure. So why is he now again threatening not only Israel's security but also our security for dividing Israel and scattering the people of Israel?
It doesn't seem to make sense because, I mean, there's Israel has suffered this appalling attack on the 7th of October, and as a reward, she's told she's got to divide up the land and give them more. And that's been the story all the way along. I mean, obviously, David Cameron is hoping to find peace partners, but there aren't any, really. I mean, because if you look at the group he assembled, especially Nigeria, which can't control its own Islamic terrorists, Boko Haram runs riot, kidnap boarding school pupils and murder Christians. We could fill the whole paper with what Boko Haram are doing. So it's hard to believe that any of them could successfully run even a small enclave like Gaza. So my other concern about bringing in other nations to run Gaza is it could easily move into a UN-run entity. UNRWA, of course, as we know, already have a major foothold. They have Hamas graduates, as it were, who are on their staff. And UNRWA has shown how anti-Israel they are through recent events. Derek Prince, wonderful, the late Bible teacher, he said there would never be a Palestinian state. And I was also reminded that God says that he would plant Israel back in her land with all his heart and soul. Now that's the word of God. And the other week at the CFI conference, Chris Mitchell of CBN pointed this out. He said it's the only place where God says he'll do something with all his heart and soul. So he's not going to start allowing bits of land to be come out from Israeli control. So if Cameron and the other nations push for this, we could see the stage being set for Armageddon when the nations of the world will come against Israel.
And Helen, don't we need to take note of what the Bible says? And there's a particular scripture that comes to mind, and that is Joel chapter 3. So I kind of read this out to our viewers. For behold, in those days, at that time, when I bring the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. Share with us your thoughts on how David Cameron is now on a dangerous collision course with the God of Israel that threatens to bring judgment upon our nation for dividing his people and scattering his people and dividing his land.
Absolutely, it's a very chilling prophecy from Joel, and David Cameron would be wise to take notice. This warning is unequivocal, and it's incredible that the land division is actually mentioned. Like I would actually say, David Cameron, you need to take notice of this. And although God has put him in that place, he's not in there. He's not there by accident. Exactly. God has put him there. God puts all the leaders in their place. But whether he will do God's will. My prayer is that he will receive a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone. He will receive God's spirit, and he will do God's will in this situation that he's been put in.
Absolutely. And Melanie, I think we're coming down to within 30 seconds. We've seen a great response to this crisis from Rishi Sunak and particularly Suella Braverman and the other cabinet ministers. But it seems that David Cameron is leading this country and Israel down a dangerous path.
Well, to be fair to the other ministers, they have made noise about a two-state solution since the beginning of the crisis. It wasn't very long before they started saying this. But I think a big concern, as Helen was talking about the EU, is that we should not go back to it and end up being a goat nation.
Yep. So Helen and Melanie, thank you so much for being my guests on this week's Politics Today. I want to thank you for watching this programme at home. We can't allow a British government to push through a two-state solution because this is no solution. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.